Hey gardeners, Lindsay here with the Mindful Living Movement, and we are back in my garden, and I'm here to ask you a question. Have you ever considered to theme your garden or theme your garden beds? Now, I ask this because it can be a really fun way to, one, arrange your garden, but two, maybe decide on what actually you're going to plant for the season. For a lot of us growing in an urban setting, we're kind of limited on space, right? We don't have a massive abundance of space to grow in. Also, time. The bigger you go with your garden, the more time it's going to take for you. So maybe you theme your year or a certain area of your garden. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about what a salsa garden looks like. So this whole big bed across the back here, this is my salsa garden. And what that means is I've got tomatoes, peppers, onions, and I have basil because I don't like growing cilantro, but normally if you were doing a proper salsa garden, you would stick cilantro in here. I stuck basil in here because it happens to be a really good companion for the rest of these guys, and I also do a lot of like tomato sauces and stuff like that, which really salsa garden could easily be converted into just like amazing tomato sauce garden as well. So the reason that I have things structured the way that I do here is one, from a companion planting standpoint, but also two, to maximize sun. So if you're kind of thinking that your salsa garden is something that you're interested in, or even, you know, just like tomato sauce garden, we can call it one or the other. I'd say mine's actually probably more of like tomato sauce because I got all the things happening for that. There is a method to the madness in how I've structured this, so I'll just guide you through and show you what is happening here. So the first thing that you're going to notice is that there is kind of a bit of a different height happening here. So along the back we have a whole bunch of tomatoes, and then progressively it gets a little bit lower, and this is by design. This is how the sun moves best through my garden space, and I wanted to maximize all of it. So I've put the tomatoes at the back here, and I've got them running up their string line trellises, so they are trellising indeterminate varieties. So they're nice and big and tall at the back. And then if we look really, really closely, we can start to see right in the front here, I've got my pepper plants. And this guy, look at these beautiful, they're like a purple Hungarian something pepper. I keep forgetting to check exactly what the variety is. But I've scattered all my peppers along the next row. You can see here they are kind of all hiding in through here. So tallest row in the back was my indeterminate tomatoes. Then I've sprinkled in my peppers. And then what I've done, because onions don't really throw a lot of shade and they like a lot of sun, they like a lot of moisture, a lot of nutrients, also why they work really well together, is I've sprinkled little bunches of them across the front. Now you may also notice that I have the calendula. These are not required. These just happen to self-seed in my garden in a lot of places, and I like them as fillers, and they're pretty and they bring in the pollinators and all that good stuff. And then if we move on here, here's a little patch of basil. So there's a pepper plant here, we've got some more basil here. So basil I've put fairly close to the front. They get similar height to peppers, but sometimes they can stay a little bit on the smaller side. So that's sort of the flow. We've got tomatoes, followed by peppers, followed by basil, followed by onions, and then I've got my pollinator friendly plants as well sprinkled in here. Also, look at these marigolds. Look at how beautiful those are. So marigolds are another really good partner to put with these guys because it helps to keep away things that we don't want and brings in insects that we do want. And another sneaky little thing here, because it also likes the same environment and they happen to be friends, is I have stuck some eggplants in the front here. So, I mean, you could do an eggplant salsa if you wanted to, lots of really great things. And you can see here is another little bundle of onions. All right, so that is the structure of your salsa garden or your tomato sauce garden, whatever you want to call it. Now, a couple sort of behind the scenes things that you might not be registering is that tomatoes, peppers, onions, what else we got going on here? Calendula, marigold, basil, cilantro, all are companions with each other, so companion planting makes it really, really easy, again, to pack them into a small space because they're all benefiting each other. So there's actually some cool science coming out about some studies they've done with whiteflies in particular attacking like fruiting plants, and marigolds. Marigolds planted with tomatoes actually repel whiteflies in a very big way, so that's pretty cool. Also onions. Onions and marigolds, they both have really sort of strong pungent aromas, and what that can sometimes do is hide the actual aroma of other plants, making it harder for the pests that want to eat it to either find them, or it just makes the environment something that they don't really want to stay in. And also when you're bringing in flowers of any kind into, especially fruiting plants, it's really easy for the pollinators, the bees, to just hop from flower to flower to flower, and then they make their way through all of your plants. And you give little environments to beneficial insects, those predator insects as well. So it's just creating a nice little balanced ecosystem from companion planting, from beneficial flowers, getting those predator insects in. And it's so stinking easy. Just give those tomatoes some height along the back, get your peppers going sort of across your medium row, I like to call it, and then your low or your front row, that's your basil, your onions, cilantro. Before we leave off here, just a quick note on cilantro. Cilantro doesn't actually really like being roasted in the heat all day long, whereas peppers and tomatoes and onions actually really do like those things, and eggplants as well. So if you're going to stick your cilantro into your salsa garden, what I tend to do is sort of tuck it underneath like your tomatoes. I put it fairly close to my tomato plants, and then I'll sort of trim out all the leaves on the bottom of the tomato plant as it grows, and then it gets a little bit of like a shadier area so it's not getting cooked, because the rest of these guys, they're best in heat spaces. Cilantro does grow really well with them, however, it doesn't like getting cooked all day long. It sometimes can bolt and go to seed on you, so just kind of tuck it underneath the bigger plants or in between your plants, and it'll just give a little bit of a barrier to sort of help eliminate getting roasted all day long. Otherwise, everything else that I've shown you here can handle lots of heat and sun all day long. Keep them very well watered and make sure that you do have a very nutrient dense soil. So before planting any of these guys, make sure that you've added in loads of compost to your soil if you can, manure if you've got it, vermicompost if you've got it. The more rich the soil, the happier the plants. You are probably going to also need to supplement maybe every 2 to 3 weeks with either top dressing more onto your soil, or just get yourself a really awesome organic fertilizer. Less is always more if you're going with like a manufactured type fertilizer, but these are plants that do benefit from consistent moisture and consistently a little bit on the more high nutrient side of things, and you will just see beautiful vigorous plants, and you will have that salsa or tomato garden, tomato sauce garden at the end of the year that you've been dreaming about. One quick little note here that I wanted to just add in as well: for best success in your salsa garden or your tomato sauce garden, whatever you want to call it, things like peppers and tomatoes and onions, even basil, they actually need to be started quite a bit early, at least in my zone here. I typically start them indoors in and around March or so for all of them, because I can only really plant outdoors mid-May or so. May 15th is sort of like our rough last frost date, and if I were to stick seeds right in the ground outside of peppers, tomatoes, onions, they would not even come close to producing for me. So just check in with where you're growing and read the seed packet. It's probably going to tell you on your tomato, start 6 to 8 weeks or 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost date, and get that going indoors, inside, or just buy starter plants, ready to go starter plants. If you're not comfortable starting indoors, and you maybe don't have grow lights and things like that, because when you start that early, like a few months ahead of time indoors, you do need grow lights for the plants to really thrive and be successful. I talked a little bit about tomatoes being, they like heat, they like sun, they like food, they like nutrients, so they're a little bit more demanding plants. And if you're just growing them, in a like Canadian winter windowsill like I am, we just don't get it long enough sun in March, and our sun is definitely not intense enough for those plants to be as vigorous as they need to be in order for them to survive transplant and then also just kind of continue on. So I thought that was an important note, because sometimes we don't get them going soon enough, and then we end up wondering what the heck we did wrong. And it's probably nothing that you did wrong, just that things got started a little bit too late and those plants just didn't have time to mature and fruit enough for you. So the earlier you can get them going and the better environments you can give them indoors, the more that they're just going to carry on outside and start to fruit for you as early in the season as possible. Because let's face it, we don't necessarily want our tomatoes to show up only in those last 2 weeks of the season. Same thing with our peppers. It's much nicer if we can get a harvest that sort of spreads out over most of the season. We can get that fresh eating, and we can start to maybe do our canning and preserving and stuff maybe over a little bit of a longer period of time, making it a bit more manageable for you. So just wanted to make that quick note, because I want your salsa garden or your tomato sauce garden to be the best that it can be. Have a great day, gardeners.